talking about integration. The theme of this year is integration. Integration is taking two separate parts, putting them together and creating a whole. And so we take our life, we take the life of Jesus, and we are to integrate the life of Jesus into our life to create a whole, that we become more like Jesus through the course of our life. It's called integration, integrating Him into our lives, His words, His way into our lives. We just got through singing a song saying that the Jesus is coming soon. And we all kind of, yeah, we've heard that, we know that, blah, 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 blah. But Jesus' words were very exact in what He was talking about, and He said, I'm going to come. And I want to read to you, Billy read from Matthew chapter 25. Well, that was right after Matthew 24, 24, 25. But in Matthew 24, I want to read the whole discourse. It is a bit lengthy, so I bear with you. We'll have it up on the board and for you to follow along. But in it, and we'll discuss it as we go. So Matthew 24, this is the last week of Jesus' life. This is what we would typically be leading up to Easter, his crucifixion and resurrection. And Jesus is spending the last few moments with His disciples. He knows what's about to happen. He knows that He's going to be leaving soon. The disciples have no idea. Those that have been following Him, especially the 12 that were closest to Him, have no idea what's about to happen, and their world is going to get totally rocked. But Jesus knows that His time is coming to an end with His disciples. And so He's teaching them throughout the week and giving them little bits of things that will not make sense to them at the time, but will eventually, they'll begin to recognize as time goes on. And so Jesus walking with them, and they're in Jerusalem, and it says that as Jesus was leaving the temple grounds, His disciples pointed out to Him the various temple buildings. Okay, in just a minute I'll show you a picture of all this, but they're walking through the temple area, and the disciples are walking with Jesus, and they're pointing out different things, and He responded to them. Do you see all these buildings? I tell you the truth. They will all be completely demolished. Not one stone will be left on top of another. Okay, if you go to the next picture. This is the temple. This is a picture of what Herod's temple would have looked like in Jesus' time. In the middle there is where in the middle there, you got to catch it quick. In the middle there, okay. Those tech guys want to let you know who's in control. The wall around the area, this was Herod's temple, and in the middle area was the temple where the sacrifices were made, and the Holy of Holies, and the Ark of the Covenant, and all that stuff. And so you can see this is quite a large complex in Jerusalem, and Jesus is telling them there's going to come a day when not one stone is going to be left on top of another. Now, He's whetting their appetite. He's giving them a prediction of the future. We know through history that in about 30 years after this, 30, 40 years after this, that the Romans surrounded Jerusalem, and indeed not one stone was left on top of this. Whole structure was demolished. Okay? So Jesus' prediction comes true. He goes on to tell them, later, Jesus sat on the Mount of Olives. His disciples came to Him privately and said, okay, so Jesus has left Jerusalem, and He's gone kind of across the way to the Mount of Olives. From the Mount of Olives, you could overlook the city of Jerusalem. And again, in a minute, I'll show you a picture that you can kind of get an idea. Okay, so they're sitting on top of the Mount of Olives, and disciples came to Him privately and say, tell us, when will all this happen? When will what happen? When will the temple be destroyed? When will these buildings come down? What sign will signal your return and the end of the world? So the disciples asked Jesus a question. Now, this is from the Mount of Olives, looking from Jerusalem at the Mount of Olives. So if you reverse that and you're sitting there, you could oversee the city. Now, this is kind of a modern picture, and if you're up close, then you can see there's actually a highway that runs through there, and there's a couple vehicles, and a bus. So that wasn't there when Jesus was talking. Just to let you know. I just want to clarify that. And probably most of those buildings and structures weren't there. It was probably just more of a mountain. But Jesus is sitting up there with his disciples overlooking, and the disciples come to him and they ask him a question. He's piqued their curiosity. He said, this temple is going to be destroyed. It's got them thinking, Jesus, when is all this is going to happen? And then they go a little bit further and say, Jesus, and you haven't really left yet, but when are you coming back? And what is going to be the sign of the end of the age? So they ask an important question. We sang earlier, Jesus comes soon. Jesus has promised that he's going to come again. So Jesus begins to talk to them and describe for them what's going to happen before he returns. So Jesus told them, don't let anyone mislead you. For many will come in my name, claiming I am the Messiah. They will deceive many, and you will hear of wars and threats of wars. But don't panic. Yes, these things must take place, but the end won't follow immediately. Nation will go to war against nation, and kingdom against kingdom. There will be famines and earthquakes in many parts of the world. But all this is only the first of the birth pains, with more to come. Now, throughout history, there have been many that have come and claimed to be the Messiah. And over time, they're exposed and it proves to be false. I believe probably one of the last ones that claimed to be Messiah that was kind of well-known well-known was, now the name just went, pew. Not Jim Jones, Manson, Charles Manson. He claimed to be the Messiah. And obviously he killed a bunch of people that he wasn't it, just in case you were confused, okay? But you see this happening throughout history that many have come and claimed to be the Messiah, but it's proven not to be true. He said, don't be deceived by that. Don't get caught up in that. So if anybody comes to you and says they're the Messiah, run the other way. Because Jesus said it's going to happen. But we need to know that. We need to be prepared for that. He also says, many will come as false prophets and deceive many. Sin will be rampant everywhere, and the love of many will... That's the next verse. He talked about wars and rumors of wars, okay, and earthquakes and famines. Don't we see that happening? Many generations have seen wars and rumors of war. Why? Because human nature, there's always going to be conflict. So he says, when you see these things, it's not yet, but just know that that's the first birth pains. How many knows when a woman's in labor, the first birth pain doesn't signal baby's coming? There's probably still more to come, more pain to come. Okay? So going on, he says, then you will be arrested, persecuted, and killed. Okay? Don't we see around the world people are getting arrested? There's persecution of Christians. Many are being killed. Doesn't it kind of seem like over the last few years there's kind of been an escalation of that? Now, there have been others throughout history that have been persecuted and killed, but it just seems to be ramping up a little bit, okay? You will be hated all over the world because you are my followers. Don't you see in the world an anti-Christian sentiment beginning to grow, even in America where we're supposed to be somewhat Christian? That being a Christian, there's a little more antagonism, that there's a little more hatred towards those that name the name of Christ. So he said, be prepared for that. That's going to come. And many will turn away from me and betray and hate each other. Okay? And many false prophets will appear and deceive many people. Sin will be rampant everywhere, and the love of many will grow cold. In the day in which we live, we see a turning of the tide. What was once considered evil has now been considered good. And the Bible says that will happen. And that which was considered good, if you stand up for any kind of morality, you're reviled. You're made fun of. That the love of evil is growing stronger. But the one who endures to the end will be saved. And the good news about the kingdom will be preached throughout the whole world so that all nations will hear it and the end will come. This is one of the verses that a lot of people are holding on to of saying why Jesus can't come, because there's still about, at last count, I think it was like 10 or 12% of the world that has not heard the gospel. And they figured with computers and the way that translation is happening now through the speed of computers, that most evangelical mission organizations are saying by 2025 that the whole world will have had a chance to hear the gospel in their own tongue and their own language. Now, give or take 5 years, okay? But you see that's happening. Now, compared to where we were in Jesus' time, when word of mouth was the tool of evangelism, it's taken a lot longer for the whole world to hear it. Jesus goes on to say, the day is coming when you will see what Daniel the prophet spoke about, the sacrilegious object that causes desecration standing in the holy place. Okay, Daniel prophesied, the book of Daniel in the Old Testament prophesied of a coming time when in the temple, which is supposed to be holy and separate to God, that the Antichrist, the enemy of God, was going to set up shop there and desecrate the temple. How he's going to do that, we don't know. Some think it's by spilling pig's blood or some desecration, but that's going to happen. Now, they don't have the temple today, so we know in order for that to happen, the temple has to be rebuilt in order for the Antichrist. So we're still safe there. That hasn't happened yet. Okay, reader, pay attention. Then those in Judea must flee to the hills. A person out on the deck of a roof must not go down into the house to pack. When you see those things happen, it's right around the corner. Get ready, get prepared. And that's what this is talking about. A person out in the field must not return to pack up and get a coat and get ready. He said, flee to the hills because the end is coming. How terrible it will be for a pregnant woman and for nursing mothers in those days. And pray that your flight will not be in winter or in the Sabbath, for there will be a greater anguish than in any time since the world began. Okay, we know that there are tougher times coming, and the Antichrist Revelation spells a lot of that out. I'm not going to go into all that now. But Jesus is kind of giving a list of things to be prepared for and watch for. And it will be so great again. In fact, unless the time of calamity is shortened, not a single person will survive. In other words, the rule of the Antichrist and the damage that he's going to do and the evil that he's going to bring upon the world, if God in his mercy did not shorten those days and say enough, and enough is when Jesus returns and takes care of evil. There's a term that we use that I can't say in church. But the enemy's going down, okay? And he says, unless the Lord would have shortened the days, everybody would have got wiped out. But it will be shortened for the sake of the God's chosen ones. Then if anyone tells you, look, here is the Messiah, or there he is, don't believe it. For false messiahs and false prophets will rise up and perform great signs and wonders so as to deceive, even if possible, even God's chosen ones, or his children, okay? Now, Revelation tells us that the Antichrist is going to come, and he's going to have given power to those that are going to work miracles and many people are going to follow them and follow because they're doing great power. Even the Antichrist himself, whoever he turns out to be, under the power of Satan he's going to be killed, and under the power of Satan is going to be raised up. People are going to go, ooh, ah, and many are going to follow him. So he said, don't get confused by that. Don't be caught off guard, okay? So, see, I have warned you about this ahead of time. So, if anyone tells you, look, the Messiah is out in the desert, don't bother to go and look. Or look, he isn't hiding here. Don't believe it. For as the lightning flashes in the east and shines to the west, so it will be when the Son of Man comes. Just as the gathering of vultures shows there's a carcass nearby, so these signs indicate that the end is near. So, Jesus is giving a word picture to them. He says, just like if you see vultures flying in the air, what do you know is somewhere close? There's a dead body. So he's saying if you see these signs starting to happen, you know the end is about to come. So he gives a picture for them to tie into. Immediately after the anguish of those days, the sun will be darkened and the moon will give no light. The stars will fall from the sky and the powers of heaven will be shaken. Okay? So Jesus says, and this is important, Jesus says that if many are going to come and say, I'm the Messiah and I'm the promised one, and they're going to do crazy things, come out to the desert or come here. And he says, look, just as the lightning flashes in the sky, the way that Jesus returns, he's going to come in the sky. When you see him, those that are believers are going to be changed in the twinkling of an eye, are going to be caught up in the air to meet him. Okay? So if somebody says, hey, We found the Messiah. He's over here. Come with us. Go, He's coming in the sky. He's not hiding in a desert somewhere. Everybody's going to see him. Everybody's going to know when Jesus comes back, because there's going to be a loud trumpet, and then it's going to get crazy. Okay? So don't get caught aware. Don't be caught unawares and fall for some of the things that are going to happen. Okay? And then, at last, the sign that the Son of Man is coming will appear in the heavens, and there will be a deep mourning among all the peoples of the earth. And they will see the Son of Man coming in the clouds of heaven with power and great glory. And he will send out his angels with the mighty blast of a trumpet, and they will gather his chosen ones from all over the world, from the farthest ends of the earth of heaven. Now learn a lesson from the fig tree. When its branches, again, he's giving a word picture. Now, Jesus is saying, look, when I come back, it's going to be a spectacle. Why is there going to be mourning all over the world? Huh? Because those that didn't follow him and were a believer in Jesus before he comes, they're going to be stuck on earth. And there's going to be, oh no, I blew it. And it says many are going to fall away. Many are going to follow. Many are going to be deceived. And in that moment, it's just like the Bible says in Philippians, every knee is going to bow and every tongue is going to confess Jesus is Lord. Now, what does that mean? It means that when you see him, whatever reasons you had for not following him, whatever reasons the world has for not believing in him, are immediately going to fall away, and they're going to go, he is the Lord of Lords. It's going to be all removed. This life is the only time that we have to choose to follow him. When he returns, it's over. So he says, it's going to be a great spectacle. There's going to be a trumpet. The angels are going to go and gather all those from heaven and earth. You know, all those that got blown to bits, those bits are going to come back together. It's going to be really cool. Okay? He says, now learn the lesson from the fig tree. When its branches bud and its leaves begin to sprout, you know. In the same way, when you see all these things, you can know that his return is very near, right at the door. I tell you the truth, this generation will not pass from the scene until all these things take place. Heaven and earth will disappear, but my words will never disappear. However, no one knows the day or hour when these things will happen, not even the angels in heaven or the Son himself. Only the Father knows. When the Son of Man returns, it will be like it was in Noah's day. In those days before the flood, the people were enjoying banquets and parties and weddings right up to the time Noah entered his boat. People didn't realize what was going to happen until the flood came and swept them all away. This is the way it will be when the Son of Man comes. 2 men will be working together in the field. One will be taken, the other left. 2 women will be grinding flour in the mill. One will be taken, the other left. So you too must keep watch, for you don't know what day your Lord is coming. Understand this. If a homeowner knew exactly when a burglar was coming, he would have kept watch and not permitted his house to be broken into. Okay, going back to the virgins that Billy read about in chapter 25, is talking about that they were waiting for the Son of Man to return. 5 had bought enough oil to do the long wait. Some just came with what they had, and they ran out. And so when they went to go buy, they weren't prepared when the Son of Man came. And so the bridegroom went in, and they were left on the out. So he's saying, be prepared. If the owner knew when his house was going to be broken in, if anybody knows, if Jesus said, okay, on January 27, 2062, I'm coming back. Guess what? Everybody would wait till the last minute. And on the 26th, just before, or 25th, just before he comes back, they'd be repenting and getting right with God. It says, no man knows the day or hour, so you be ready. Nobody knows when the house is going to be broken into. If you knew when the house was going to be broken in, you wouldn't have left. Okay? You also must be ready at the time, for the Son of Man will come when least expected. A faithful, sensible servant is one to whom the master can give the responsibility of managing his other household and servants and feeding them. If the master returns and finds the servant has done a good job, there will be a reward. I tell you the truth, the master will put the servant in charge of all that he owns. Those that are diligent to the end and being faithful in what God has called them to do, when Jesus returns, there's going to be a reward, and people will be given more responsibility. However, if the servant says, my master won't be back for a while, and he begins beating the other servants, partying and getting drunk, the master will return unannounced and unexpected, and he will cut up the servant to pieces and assign him a place with the hypocrites, hellfire and damnation. In that place there will be weeping and gnashing of teeth. Okay? In those days, so Jesus gives those signs. He tells you what's about to happen, how to be ready, how to be prepared. We are moving towards the last days. There are things that are coming. There are some things that haven't happened yet. Okay, so you can go, not quite there yet, but it is coming. There's two things I want to pull out from this passage of Scripture and talk about briefly, okay? The first one, you'll be happy to know, out of 6 pages, I'm on page 4. Go to the next slide. Okay, he calls out this. In the last days, in the days before the flood, so this is going back to Genesis chapter 6, the people were enjoying banquets and parties and weddings right up to the time that Noah entered the boat. Okay, so those of you that are not familiar, in Genesis chapter 6, God is saying, I repent from the fact that I made man, because evil is in their heart. All their thoughts are evil. All they think about. But Noah was righteous in the eyes of, one man was righteous in the eyes of the Lord. And God said, I am going to destroy mankind and I'm going to start over with Noah and his family. So he comes to Noah and he says, Noah, I want you to build a boat. And Noah says, what's a boat, Lord? He said, I'm going to cause it to rain for 40 days and 40 nights. Noah goes, what's rain, Lord? It didn't rain on the earth. They had no idea what rain was. For 120 years, it took Noah 120 years to build the boat. Okay, now this is no small little rowboat that you put out on the lake, and this is a massive, which, if anybody wants to know what the ark looks like, do you know that they have an exhibit in Kentucky where they have built a replica of the ark, and you can go and visit it? Someday I'm going to go. It's a huge boat. Now, for 120 years, people are walking by going, Noah, what are you doing? God said it's going to rain. He's going to flood the earth. I'm going to build a boat. Noah, you are nuts. You are crazy. And for 120 years, they went about life. They were giving in marriage. They were having feasts. They were having parties. They were having banquets. They were just doing life as usual, having no idea what was coming. They were just living their life, enjoying life. All the while, Noah is building a boat, and they're going, oh, you're such an idiot. Oh, you're so crazy. Hey, today people are saying, Jesus is coming soon. And what do you hear out in the world? Oh, yeah, we've been hearing that for years. That's just crazy talk. There is no God. You don't have to worry about that. That's just some man-made construction in order to control the masses. The Bible isn't real. That's just a bunch of hooey-balooey. They ridicule it. They make fun of it. And all the while, people are given in marriage. They're living life. They're not paying attention to the signs. They're not paying attention. And the sad part is, so are a lot of Christians. They're not paying attention. And God is warning them. He says, just like in the days of Noah, they'll be given in marriage. They'll be living life. They'll be doing their thing. All the while, there was this huge construction going on of something that was coming, and they ignored it. And those same people that ridiculed and made fun of Noah were sure pounding on the boat when the rain started to fall and the water started to rise. They weren't making fun of him then. And there's going to come a day, just like it said, there's going to be mourning because it's going to be too late. The Son of Man will be returned. And he says, be ready, be prepared, know that it's coming. He says people don't realize what is going to happen until the flood came and swept them all away. This is what it will be like when the Son of Man comes. The second passage I want to pull out from there is, and many will turn away from me and betray and hate each other. And many false prophets will appear and will deceive many people. Sin will be rampant everywhere, and the love of many will grow cold. Now, love in general, love of spouses, love of families, love of children will grow cold, but also the love of God. The passion to know God, to serve God, to be with God is going to grow cold, and people are going to be deceived. Ladies and gentlemen, the church, people, you that are here today, people's hearts are growing cold. God's church is growing cold. It is time to wake up. Now, no marriage, nobody stands on their wedding day going, in 10 years, I'm going to hate you and I'm going to throw you away. Nobody goes into marriage like that. Everybody is so wonderful and passionate and love and, oh man, I just want to spend every waking moment with you and it's just so great. So how do you get from passionately in love and wanting to spend the rest of your life together to I hate you, get out of my life, it's over? It's a slow progression of life's responsibilities that tear at the fabric of the relationship. There's bills to be paid, jobs to do. There's kids that come. They take our time. They take our attention. Priorities, other responsibilities are pulling at the fabric of the relationship, and little by little by little, I have seen so many marriages end after the kids are grown because they spent all their time worrying about the kids and taking care of the kids. And when the kids were gone, they looked at each other and said, I don't even know who you are, and I'm not sure I like you. And they divorced because they didn't take the time to fan the flames of passion and desire and love. The same thing is going to happen to the believers at the end of the world, at the end of time. That over time, nobody goes, I'm going to renounce the Lord and I'm not going to serve him. I want to go to hell. Nobody says that. But over time, little by little, the passion for serving Jesus, for loving God, for being obedient to his word, the responsibilities of life begin to pull at us. We live in America, the great country of America, where anything is at our disposal. We can have basically anything we want. And if we work hard enough, we can have it. And it's consumed us, and it drives us. And the church is growing cold and walking away from its passion. We're losing the oil in our lamps, and we don't even realize it. I'm reading a book right now by Greg Laurie, and it's called The Jesus Revolution. And it talks about the revival of the 70s in the youth movement, among the youth culture. Now, this was born out of the 60s. And for those of you that have only been around for the last 10 or 12 years, the 60s were a very tumultuous time. There were 3 assassinations of high political figures, well, 2 political figures and a religious leader. Martin Luther King Jr. was assassinated. John F. Kennedy was assassinated, and his brother Bobby Kennedy was assassinated, all in the 60s. Vietnam War broke out. The drug culture, the youth rebelled against the things that were going on, and the youth and the hippie movement was born. Drugs became rampant. Sex became free. Everybody was partying and doing it, and it just was a crazy time. Moving into the 70s, things were in chaos. And starting in the West Coast, a revival began to happen among the young people. That they began to turn from this chaos and this. They found that the drug culture and the hippie movement and free love did not bring them the ecstasy and the utopia that they had hoped. And they began to turn to Jesus. And a revival swept up and down the West Coast and began to move across the nation. A lot of churches were born. Calvary Chapel was born out of this movement because so many of the mainstream churches, as these young people with long hair, smocks, and barefoot were coming into churches, people were going, not here.